The Capitals and Kings hold serve, and the Dallas Stars stun the Colorado Avalanche in overtime for the second consecutive game. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Thursday, April 24th, 2025. Vic and Neil with you. We have seen over the course of our lifetimes hundreds of playoff series, and it never ceases to amaze me that no two are exactly alike. There is a different cadence, a different way that every playoff series plays out. There may be some similarities, but it's like a fingerprint. No two are ever exactly alike. And I think we saw that again on Wednesday evening.
Yeah, and expect the unexpected is what I say too, because you never know. And you can say that, for example, the Dallas Stars are undermanned and they got injuries, and Colorado's getting its captain coming back and they're playing their first game at home, and on and on and on. You just don't know.
Let's start the evening in Washington, D.C., where the Capitals go up 2-0, a 3-1 win over Montreal after a scoreless first period where the Canadiens played relatively well. Christian Dvorak opened the scoring, but then right after that, Connor McMichael, who had not only the game-tying goal but the empty netter, and Dylan Strome a minute apart. And that was pretty much it. But as we saw in the opening game of that series, third period, Capitals protecting a lead. I saw a lot of the signatures of game one in that second game, maybe quite not the relentlessness of the attack by the Canadiens. And Logan Thompson, that was a virtuoso performance in the third period with a handful of terrific saves.
It sure was. And Montalban at the other end couldn't be blamed on the goals, I don't think, that got in on him. Strome was left all by himself. McMichael found himself in a good position. And I was really impressed. And I know you said Logan Thompson. I was really impressed with him as well. You know now why he's number one on the Washington Capitals team as the number one goaltender. He was just great. This has been a good series. I mean, it's 2-0 Washington, but it's a lot closer series than I think a lot of people would have given it credit for. I think people thought that Washington ran away with the Eastern Conference this year. Montreal snuck in at the last minute. Washington will make easy work of Montreal, but it hasn't been easy. The first game was overtime, and this game was a 2-goal win. So, Washington still have their hands full. A 2-0 lead usually means you win the series. I think the percentages are up almost 90% of the time. The team that goes up by 2 wins the series. But I don't think Washington's getting out of this unscathed.
I happen to agree, and I wanted to go back to them protecting the lead in the third period. And as I said, I didn't find the pressure to be quite as relentless as it was in game one, but I'm pretty underwhelmed by the Caps' puck management in their own end, the decision-making, and the poise wasn't real good. And it was really only Thompson that saved them last night.
And you got to wonder, and I know this is a tired subject now, but you got to wonder whether they got off their game plan because of the OV chase. And perhaps being the number one seed is saving them right now because they're getting their game in order against the number 8 seed. But you're right. They're not the same team that we saw winning night after night during most of the regular season.
But I would say don't blame Ovi for this because he's got 13 hits in the first 2 games of this series. And I think there's some other sidebar stories. The one-on-one battles that are going on between Tom Wilson and Josh Anderson, and those two have been going toe-to-toe so far, and look for that to continue when the series shifts to Montreal. But also, this is one I think you'll sink your teeth into. Patrick Laine plays 10 minutes and 10 seconds in the first 2 periods, doesn't see the ice in the third when the Canadiens are trying to tie the game. And Marty St. Louis just said, I like the players that I had out there, but
So there was no injury to Laine?
Not that we know of. I mean, he may have been banged a little bit, but he was on the bench for the entire third period.
Look, we know what Laine is by now. I mean, he's been around to a lot of different teams, and he's terrible defensively, and perhaps that's what St. Louis was concerned about. He didn't want it to get to 3-1 before it did. And that's maybe what he was concerned about, was that he didn't see the game in Laine last night that he wanted. You notice 92 when he's in the offensive zone, and then all of a sudden you don't know where 92 is once the puck comes out of the offensive zone. Like, where is he? Is he, So perhaps that's what Marty St. Louis was concerned about.
-2 in game one and was on the ice for Ovi's overtime winner. Game 3 of this series will be Friday at 7 p.m. at the Bell Center. The Dallas Stars go into Colorado, even in a game apiece. Colin Blackwell with the overtime winner in game 2. And Gabriel Landeskog made his comeback after 1,032 or 33 days, depending on how you calculate that. But nonetheless, it was a raucous ovation, very emotional. And at the same time, I thought, Neil, that after the initial swell of adulation came out, I saw a Colorado team that somewhat flattened out. And this was something that we had addressed on Wednesday, that how would they be able to handle that? And I felt after that initial rush, the building kind of settled in, and that's a very noisy building. And that became a very ordinary night for the Avs.
Surprisingly ordinary, because you would have thought that was the impetus for sure. The Landeskog coming back in that building and the roar that he would have got would have really propelled them against a banged up Dallas team, but it didn't do it. Surprising. Certainly, that's not what I calculated that would happen.
I don't think a lot of people did, and it was interesting right at the beginning that his former teammate Mikko Rantanen lined up alongside Landeskog. They exchanged a couple of words, and right after that, Landeskog laid his first hit of 6 that he had in the game on Rantanen. He finished the game with 13 minutes and 16 seconds of ice time. But one of the things that really stood out in this game for me is the adjustments that Peter DeBoer has made in containing both Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar, neither of them having a lot of room on the ice. I mean, there wasn't a lot of room, period, last night. But the efforts that the Stars are making to take as much ice away from possible from those two superstars is very noticeable.
Peter DeBoer is an excellent coach. We all know that. He's been around a long time. And this is just another feather in his cap that he actually has got the lead in this series. I just did not see this coming. I thought that with those injuries and with Landeskog coming back, the Colorado would be the one to have the lead. Now, I know that's been overtime and all that stuff, so it could have gone either way. But still, the game plan that DeBoer put in place for MacKinnon and Makar, guys that are unstoppable basically during the regular season, was excellent, and they were bottled up.
Their only goal came off the stick of Val Nichushkin, who literally, if you tracked him around the ice, it looked like a pretzel. He held the puck for 9 seconds from the time that he received it coming across the Dallas blue line until he scored. It was a remarkable goal. We've seen similar with that before I remember Denny Savard during the early 90s pulling one off, and that was pretty much that as well. I think Steve Yzerman had a goal like that also at one point during his career, but never do you see one player hold a puck for that long.
And 9 seconds sounds on this podcast like it's a very short period of time. But in a hockey game, it's an extremely long period of time. What I find interesting, too, is Nichushkin, the ex-Dallas Star, against Rantanen, the ex-Colorado Avalanche. Both of them stars. Both of them can do damage going against their old team. Now, they were different circumstances why they aren't on that old team anymore, but still, one was once an Av and one was once a Star.
Something else that stood out in this game was a lot of self-inflicted wounds. In the third period, with the Avalanche up 1-0, they took consecutive penalties. One in the offensive zone by Arturi Lehkonen, and then one in the neutral zone by Nathan MacKinnon, and that second penalty ended up with Jamie Benn's game-tying goal. And then at the end of regulation, a double minor taken by Mason Marchment, a high stick on Brock Nelson. And that penalty spilled over 3 minutes and 21 seconds into the overtime, and the Stars managed to escape that. And what fascinated me was the principles on the winning goal. Mikko Rantanen with the second assist. He had no points, but was far more visible in this game. I thought he actually played quite well. He fought off Jonathan Drouin to get the pass to Marchment, who had taken the penalty at the end of regulation. And the goal was scored by Tyler Seguin, who returned for his last regular season game after not having played since December 1st. And for the second consecutive overtime, it's a short-in shot, high glove on Mackenzie Blackwood.
It just goes to show you how good a player Seguin still is in this league. And we might have forgotten that. They were lucky to get out of that power play, that penalty kill. The Stars were, and still have life. I can imagine that everybody was holding their breath back in Dallas. But these guys study the opposition. You talk about scoring high glove on Blackwell. Maybe that's where they have noticed that he can be beaten. That's where he's weak. A lot of goalies today, though, are weak up high because there is no down low. Pucks don't go in down low. They're on their knees and they're spread eagle, or they're butterflied across the goal line. It makes a very interesting series when you say that the Stars have only led for 62 seconds, just over a minute of these 3 games, 180 minutes of playing time, not including overtime. And they've had very little time. So you still got to think Colorado's going to get it together and win this with the injuries that Dallas is enduring. But you never know. If it goes one more game like that, Colorado's back is to the wall again.
Miro Heiskanen is back skating with the club, so the longer Dallas keeps in this series, and for them, either they win or it goes at least 6 games, the closer Heiskanen comes to returning, and perhaps Jason Robertson as well at some point. So for a team that, at least from my perspective, was in trouble after game 1, they now have home ice advantage back, and game 4 of that series will be Saturday at 9:30. I think this one surprised you a lot in that, based on the comeback that the Edmonton Oilers had in game 1, only to lose in the final 42 seconds, thought that they were going to come out and feed off that momentum, albeit in the loss in game 2 against Los Angeles. And that did not happen despite Evander Kane playing his first game of the season.
I didn't think that necessarily Kane coming back into the lineup would mean a victory for Edmonton. It's not like Heiskanen coming back for Dallas. Kane has been out all season long. He's never played at all from training camp right till now. I'm just surprised that Edmonton didn't get their game more in order after the way they came back, and could have told themselves, well, you know what, we just blew it in game 1. We only played 1 period. And if we'd played 3, we would have beat them. But LA really spanked them in this game.
The aforementioned Kane took a cross-checking penalty against Brand Clark, and the opening goal of the game was scored by Brand Clark on a nice feed from Warren Fogle, former Oiler who came down the left wing boards, made the feed, and Clark got the goal. But here's what really stands out. Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar, 4 points apiece. And when you add in Andrei Kuzmenko on that top line, first 2 games, 6 goals, 11 assists, 17 points. And if somebody had told you before the start of the series that one team would be 5 for 10 on the power play and the other would be 0 for 5, what would you have thought?
Well, of course, you're going to say it would be the Oilers that would be the 5 for 10, and the Kings it would be the 0 for 5. So you got Kempe, Kopitar, and Kuzmenko. the 3Ks playing really well, but Kuzmenko has been just a fabulous pickup by Rob Blake.
I was very curious to see when the game went to 3-0, if Edmonton got a goal, which they did. Leon Draisaitl tip in to make it 3-1. They make it 3-2 at the 4:05 mark on Victor Arvidsson's goal. But then his turnover leads to Adrian Kempe's goal, and another guy that they were counting on for offense, Adam Henrique, takes a penalty that leads to the Anze Kopitar goal to make it 5-2, and the eventual pulling of Stu Skinner at the 10-minute commercial break. Skinner's got 11 goals against in 2 games, 6.11 goals against average in the series, and an .810 save percentage. And this is an area that you have been skeptical on all year, so I'm going to pump your tires a little bit because Calvin Pickard then came in. He gave up a goal on his first shot. So the problems that we had seen, the problems that you had seen in the Edmonton net are manifesting, and then you look at the other end, and Darcy Kemper has been very strong through the first 2 games, albeit giving up 5 in game 1.
Do we know if Skinner was lifted to rest him, or was he lifted because they thought that by putting Pickard in, they had a chance to come back? I mean, I find that hard to believe.
I think it was more to just give him a blow and give Pickard some ice time. It was 5-2, and you could see that the Kings were protecting this lead way differently than they had done in game 1. So I believe Chris Knobloch just made the change, give your other guys some time, and then we're going to see, because there was actually some question as to whether or not Pickard was going to actually start in game 2. So now you're down 2-0. You've given up 12 goals combined in the first 2 games. What are you going to do? Because your goaltending certainly hasn't been good enough, and your star players have to really rise in game 3.
But I think, and I'm not a coach, but I think you got to go with the guy that got you there last year and got you there through the season. I know he hasn't been good in the first 2 games, but if I'm going home for game 3, which is a must win, I got to go with Skinner. He's our number 1 guy. You say to him, I believe in you, and I'm putting you back in, and you go with him. I think, but we'll see what Knobloch does.
There was good and bad coming out of game 1 for both clubs. But now that the Kings have had 2 similar games where they've gotten out to big leads, the Oilers have come back. They've beaten them in 2 very different ways. The dramatic win in game 1 where they get the last-minute goal, and then this one where not only are they able to protect the lead, but they're able to grow it as well.
They got to be going to Edmonton with a ton of confidence now. Edmonton's got to be, trying to figure out what they got to do different to win at home. Funny thing is, Vic, is that if it was 2-0 Edmonton going back to LA, so the reverse, you might have more confidence that LA would come back because of their strong home record during the season. But Edmonton doesn't have that home record that LA has, not even close. So you got to wonder, are they going to be able to come back in this series? I don't see it now. I didn't see it before the series started, but I certainly don't see it now.
I believe that home ice meant more to the Kings with a 31-6-4 record during the course of the regular season. And of course, the history of these clubs going back to the 3 previous playoffs where the Oilers had home ice. I believe that this was more important for the Kings to have, and they have held serve. So with that, game 3 of this series shifts to Edmonton Friday at 10 o'clock. Let's go to Thursday's game, where we have 4 on the slate. It's a split ticket between TBS and ESPN2. There's some sort of football event going on in the mothership. Florida at Tampa Bay. The Panthers lead this series 1-0. You'd said you expect a lot more from the Lightning in game 2. John Cooper will make the requisite adjustments. We'll have to see if Anthony Cirelli is in the lineup after he left game 1.
He's a game-time decision for the Lightning. He's not on the ice for the morning skate today. Florida will also play the same way and will try to grind them down. And I'm not sure. Again, like I love predicting and thinking I know who's going to win a game. Of course, after last night, I don't think I know anything. But Florida at Tampa on Thursday is a tough one to predict. They're both great teams, but can Tampa's skill get out from under that aggressive game that Florida plays? We'll have to wait and see, but it's a good one for sure.
6:30 on TBS. Toronto and Ottawa with the Leafs leading 2-0. This one is at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. And for the Senators, important that they have the same discipline in Game 3 as they had in Game 2. And very often what you will see is when a team comes home, there's a shift in venue, there's a lot of energy, and they've really got to keep that contained the same way they did in the second game in Toronto.
Oh, and in Ottawa, where they haven't had a playoff game since 2017, that crowd will be raucous. The only thing is, as you know, just like with Islanders and Rangers, just like everywhere else that Toronto goes, there'll be a huge contingent of Leaf fans in the Ottawa building. When the Leafs score, you'll think that Ottawa scored, other than the horn won't be going. I don't see Ottawa going out 4 straight, by the way. I think Toronto's going to win this series, but I don't see Ottawa, dying in 4.
Typically, though, in series like this, they can't go down 3-0 and think that they're going to win Game 4 and go Game 5 and then bring it back to Ottawa. I think this is the game that they've got to get.
Oh, absolutely. No, Game 3 is the game you've got to get. If you're down 2-0, it's a must-win. Absolute must-win.
Vegas and Minnesota will play their third game with the series tied at 1 apiece, 9 o'clock on TBS. I love the way that the Wild have played these first 2 games. Their injuries are behind them. Team is playing well. And this is actually turning out to be a fairly favorable matchup for them against the favored Golden Knights.
It is, and they've kept Eichel off the scoreboard completely. Kaprizov, Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy have been fantastic. Gustafsson has been good in net for Minnesota, by the way. He doesn't get enough credit. Vegas has got to win this. I think they got to take the first game. I don't think they can lose the first game and go into game number 4 down 2-1, because if they lose that and 3-1, you usually never come back. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Vegas. They're the top seed in this series. They're the team that everybody thought would win. Minnesota was falling, but did make the 7th seed. But now all of a sudden, as we said, with that 97 coming back in their lineup and Eriksson Ek coming back in their lineup, they look like a new team.
Last game of the evening will be Winnipeg at St. Louis on ESPN2 at 9:30. Gabe Vilardi is on this trip for the Jets, usually on the top line with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor, but certainly Alex Iafallo has done an excellent job filling into that role. This is a 2-0 lead for the Jets in a series that started physical, got more physical in Game 2. Again, a change in venue here, so the Blues are going to have to be disciplined early, but they have played well enough to win either, if not both of these games against the President Trophy winning Jets.
Yeah, they have. But tonight is a must-win for the St. Louis Blues, Jim Montgomery's group. They know it, just the same as Ottawa knows it. They can't go down 3-0. You're not going to come back 4 straight on the Winnipeg Jets.
Now that you're caught up with all the series, a little bit of news from around the league and everything coming from the New York metro area. To the dismay of many, Chris Drury has received a multi-year extension to remain the Rangers' general manager. Former GM, I hand it over to you.
Shocking that you could have a season the way the Rangers did, which you can have a bad season, you can have things go wrong, but when you light the match yourself and you're rewarded with a new contract, that is really surprising. So he lit the match on a number of bombs that went off with the Rangers this season, and maybe that's the way you get a new contract. And the other 31 GMs out there, take note.
The biggest piece of scrutiny is going to be who he's going to bring in as the next head coach. However, he's got to look in the mirror and say, I did not get the players that were needed to win at playoff style hockey. And we saw in 22 and 24, when the team made it to the conference finals, that 10 wins is a lot different from 16. And either the club was unwilling or unable to make those sacrifices to play pucks in deep and exercise forechecks in order to push themselves through to the finals and perhaps even win the cup. And that certainly wasn't addressed in 2024-25.
No. And this group that they had this year, which ended the season a lot different than what ended last season.
Yep.
They can't do that. They can't play that way. Artemi Panarin is a very gifted hockey player. But who would you want to go in the playoffs with? Matthew Tkachuk or Artemi Panarin?
I want a guy that's going to play 200 feet up and down as opposed to a guy that's going to play 85 feet side to side. And Zibanejad is that also. And you could look at a number of players that they're all drinking the same Kool-Aid on that one.
And that's why they've got to make some drastic changes. And whether he knows how to make those changes or not, or recognizes it or agrees with it, remains to be seen. One thing we do know is he will remain at the helm.
JT Miller was a good start, but more needs to happen. Otherwise, whoever the coach is going to be, I mean, they are going to try to impose their will, and they're going to probably try to get this team to play straight line. But the truth is if the players aren't able to do it and they're not willing to do it, you're going to have a new head coach again in 2027.
You're also going to have a better year next year than you had this year. Because it's a new coach. It's a whole new day. There's optimism. There's all that stuff. Will they make the playoffs? I don't know. Will they? I can't see with this core them going anywhere in the playoffs, but we'll see. They still got Shesterkin, but we found out this year you can't just have a fabulous goalie and get anywhere.
Cal Clutterbuck retires after 17 seasons, 1,064 games played, split between the Minnesota Wild and the New York Islanders. You've watched him closely over the last few years. And when the Islanders had their run to the Final Four in 2020 and 2021, Clutterbuck was a key component on that fourth line, along with Casey Cizikas and Matt Barton. Real workman-like guy, and I also see him having a future on New York Centric next season.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on. But Cal's a good guy. I got to know him a little bit from going to all the Islander games. He does a little bit of between periods analysis along with Thomas Hickey and Shannon Hogan. Good guy. I was surprised he wasn't playing in the league last year. I thought he could still play. He's a Paul Holmgren type of forechecker. You got to be worried. He's coming in like a missile. I think he did a real good job both for Minnesota and for the Islanders. I asked him at the end of his career, do you see yourself as a Wild or as an Islander? And he said, definitely an Islander. So that's how he's, which I think is important because you wonder, when I think of Cal, I think of him playing for the Minnesota Wild, but he thinks of himself as an Islander, which is really nice.
Never took a shift off.
Never. No. Played hard every game, every shift.
And back down from nobody. And he's the type of player that everybody would certainly want at this time of year, particularly in the playoffs, where a guy that would literally go through a wall.
Oh, and has, I think, before because of the way he checks in the offensive zone. The other thing, Vic, that I'll say about him is he goes on the list of the greatest hockey names. Clutterbuck is a great hockey name. And one of these shows we're going to do, we're going to come up with a list of 25 or so of the best hockey names. Certainly Clutterbuck will be on there.
That's going to be your homework for over the summer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor.
You know what time it is?
Not time to go to the dentist.
No, it's not, but it is your favorite part of the show coming up. So tell me, sir, what day is it?
April 24th?
No, it's not.
Putting it up to LaFontaine. He gets tripped up, gets it to May, and over the line. He's May going in on goal. He shoots. He scores! Mayday! 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 Brad May wins it in overtime!
That's great. I remember that so well. I remember it for some bad memories for me because we were out of the playoffs that year and I was watching everybody else play, and the Buffalo Sabres had a really good team. Pat LaFontaine, Brad May was a special guy. He's a really good guy. I got to know him through broadcasting. Really good guy. Played really hard. You talk about Clutterbuck playing hard. This guy played hard too in a different way. Fought everybody, and certainly a great call in Buffalo.
The legendary call of Rick Janneret, and there's a little bit of backstory to this, but I kind of want to set the stage and go back a little bit. So this was on April 24th, 1993. The Sabres were fourth in the Adams division, finishing 23 points behind the Bruins in the standings, but they took a 3-0 series lead into the odd for Game 4. Two of those first three series wins coming in overtime. The Bruins led the fourth game 5-2 in the second, 5-3 midway in the third. Alexander McGillney and Yuri Himalev scored after the midway point in the third to tie the game, and at 4:48, May received his pass from Pat LaFontaine, who was tripped up and was actually on his hip down on the ice when he made the pass. May got inside position on current Bruins GM Don Sweeney, then pulled the puck back between Hall of Famer Ray Bork's skates, score the winner against Andy Moog. And when interviewed after, Janneret was asked if the call was rehearsed.
How could it be rehearsed? How would you know to rehearse that?
People aren't seeing your reaction, but your facial expression was the same as when Janneret was asked the question, because he said, are you kidding? He hadn't scored in 18 games. I actually went back and did the research. He hadn't scored in 27 games going back 66 days. So the Sabres won 3 out of the 4 games in that series in overtime in the sweep. And then they turned around and they got swept by the Canadiens. And you remember that spring, Montreal lost their first overtime game in the series against Quebec and then reeled off 10 in a row, 3 coming in that series. But all 4 of those games in the second round that they lost to the Canadiens were by a 4-3 score. But still, the legend of that call, one of the all-time greats in NHL history by one of the all-time unique play-by-play men.
Yeah, that was a fabulous call. And of course, the coach of the Montreal Canadiens was Jacques Demers back then. And Montreal went on to win the Stanley Cup in 1993 and remaining today the last Canadian team to have won the Stanley Cup up until now. So there's a lot to that 1993 and that call. And boy, did the Pagulas, the owners of the Sabres, ever wish that they could have that Sabres team now and have those results with those Sabres that they're not getting now, because it's been 14 straight non-playoff seasons.
May was not exactly known for his offensive prowess, as exemplified by the stats that I gave before on him. More of a tough guy, but such an incredibly deft move that he made. And it's one of those things that just instinct takes over, because I think that if you have to think about what you're going to do there, you'd never do it.
No, for sure. You can't think about it. You just got to do. You just got to do. It's like driving a car. When you come to the intersection, you got to be ready for anything, and you just got to do what you've got to do.
1992-93, not for you, Neil, but in general, is regarded as one of the all-time great NHL seasons, and that goal was certainly one of the highlights in that year.
For sure.
That wraps up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like us, and share the word about this podcast. We are getting stuff out every day. Our coverage is in depth. We're having some fun with it. We're giving you a little bit of history. I think this is one-stop shopping.
We got to make sure all the folks out there subscribed. I mean, it's one thing to listen. You got to get people to subscribe. Please hit subscribe. Get your friends to subscribe. Get your other hockey fans to subscribe. We got to keep this thing going. And the only way we can do that is by everybody out there subscribing to the podcast.
And as we said before, reach out to us by email. Vic at NHLWraparound.com, Neil at NHLWraparound.com. We will respond to you. So please remain in touch with us, and we will speak to you again on Friday, recapping the Thursday games and then setting up the weekend ahead.